housing for like the middle class. I was like, no, but it was funny. It wasn't like a bad argument. It was like me trying to get my point across. Like you asking about which camera is yours.
I played it up with most of the time, many times too.
Hey, it's all right.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. Is that the one y'all were looking for, the 23rd Psalm? He leads me beside.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said,
restores my soul.
you said which one? I said Psalms 23, and then you started saying another one. I was like, okay.
Yeah,
It's John something. John.
3:6. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is gentrification in Nashville. Excuse me. And we have to talk about gentrification. Excuse me. Yeah. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is gentrification in Nashville, Tennessee. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about gentrification in Nashville, Tennessee, Alana McLaughlin. And Alana, let me welcome you to the show this morning. And I don't think that there's anything that we can say in terms of introducing you to our audience, because I think you've been with us almost 10 years now, and we have been delighted to have had you as our main guest, generally the first guest that we have on each of our tapings. So let's start off by talking about something that most of our audience know about you, Alana. Let's talk about your background, your education, and some of your experiences that eventually led you to us this morning. And after that, we will talk about gentrification in Nashville, Tennessee as a topic. Let's do it from that perspective.
Well, Dr. Haney, I'm a junior at the Nashville School of Arts where I play trumpet. I am trumpet section leader at Pearl Cone High School where I march. And I'm very musically driven, but also very history driven, and I guess I get that from you. And gentrification it's a hot topic in politics right now, and it's becoming so prevalent in Nashville that I just decided to talk about it. I mean, if you look up maps of gentrification, like tracks or anything, only 5 areas were gentrified in 2000 in Nashville, and now there are 12. So I started thinking, I was like, people need to learn what gentrification is because it's right under our noses.
And so that was your motivation in a real sense for talking about this particular topic this morning, gentrification in Nashville. And I agree with you that there's a lot of information that can be said in reference to it. But in terms of preparing for such a topic, Alana, why don't you give me some idea in terms of how you approach this topic from the very, very beginning? Because this is really such an unusual kind of topic to talk about, and I think, as you indicated, it's something that that is apparent and present all over Nashville. But what made you decide to talk about this as a topic this morning?
Well, marching at Pearl High School, I have a lot of friends who live in the vicinity of Pearl, and that'd be downtown Nashville, various Section 8 housing or government housing, or just regular urban neighborhoods surrounding North Nashville. And North Nashville as a whole actually is being considered to be gentrified. There are a lot of areas within North Nashville that have already been gentrified, like the Joe Johnson area. If you go over there and look at Joe Johnson and just the scenery, you wouldn't believe that it didn't start off as this middle class, urban, these beautiful, beautiful homes. You wouldn't believe that this only a few years ago was government assisted housing. These homes did not look like this. The people living in them weren't there a couple years ago, and the rent was not as high. And so in thinking about how closely affected I am to gentrification, seeing my friends have their homes and their neighborhoods gentrified, it really made me want to talk about it and speak out against this, because people need to know what's going on and why things are happening.
And so in a real sense, Lana, I think we might say that gentrification is in Nashville, but it's not peculiar to Nashville. And I think that
Definitely
when you
not.
think in terms of urban areas all over the United States, that many of these areas are impacted by what we call gentrification. And that was the idea that occurred to me when you indicated that you wanted to talk about this as a topic, because I think that there are so many areas that you might be able to look at in terms of the impact that this has on the families, the impact that it has upon young people, and I think, as you've indicated, the impact that it has upon the very, very nature and the very, very scenery of Nashville itself. So what we'll do when we finish this particular segment within a minute, we're going to give you an opportunity during this second segment to lay out what you consider to be the map or the track of gentrification in Nashville, and from that perspective, to talk about some of the unusual things that fall within some of those tracks and some of the issues that are involved, because there's a lot of, as you indicated, a lot of opposition. And there's a lot of talk in reference to gentrification, the ability of folks to live well within the area that they once owned in a real sense. And so what we'll do, we'll take our first commercial break, and then we'll come back and give you an opportunity to talk about the issue of gentrification itself in Nashville. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. So this is our 8-minute segment. Okay.
How's that?
All right.
Mic check.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. How does that work for you?
What is that from? Now is the time for all good. What is that from?
That's what you learn in typing. That's generally, when you take a type course. ASDF space, all good boys like in music. AFDS space, all good boys.
Boys do fine.
Yeah. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's giving us some information relative to gentrification in Nashville, Tennessee. And so, Alana, let's pick up where we left off the first time to give you an opportunity to explain, in a real sense, some of the issues dealing with gentrification, the location, the tracks that they fall on, and the impact that it is having upon neighborhoods as well as upon individuals within those neighborhoods. I think that if we do it from that perspective, we'll have an opportunity to talk about a large number of things.
Well, let's start off by explaining what gentrification is. Gentrification is the process of renovating a house or district or neighborhood to cater to middle class wants and needs. To put that into smaller terms, basically transforming neighborhoods to appeal to more affluent residents. Basically, or in even more basic terms, an example of gentrification, hypothetically, could be, say, somewhere in a city there is a government-assisted Section 8 low-income neighborhood.
A blighted neighborhood.
A blighted neighborhood. And say this blighted neighborhood is very, very close to the central business district, or basically, which would be downtown for Nashville, the big
core of
epicenter of the city, the where everyone wants to be. Say that this blighted neighborhood is in close proximity to the CBD. People high up in real estate will see the fact that, oh, there's this precious, this valuable land and it's close to downtown, and now they're gonna buy it. They're gonna take it over, give it a new name. Over time, they're going to slowly upcharge the rent, knowing that these low-income families can't pay this because with I'd say the majority of government-assisted housing, they pay 40% of their income. So when these homes get upcharged by like 500%, they can't afford to live there, which displaces families. And overall, it changes the cultural and ethnic landscape of the neighborhood. So say that the neighborhood was primarily Asian or African-American, they're wiping these people out and bringing in the young, the rich, the double income with no kids type residents who want to live very close to downtown, want to go to bars every weekend, all this and that, want to be able to go to like the Gulch, if we were talking about Nashville. And so they move these people in, and one of the biggest problems with gentrification, I just mentioned it, is displacement. The people who gentrify these areas know consciously that the people living there will not be able to afford to live there much longer. And it's kind of a humanity issue because everything's about the dollar bill. Everything's about money. They know that buying this area and upcharging this rent, that's money. And they know that the people coming in who are moving in once these people in this blighted neighborhood move out, that they're bringing money. And the businesses that they create and that they work at, that's jobs, that's overall, it's money. It's boosting the economy for the city. It's giving the city a better look because once they take these blighted neighborhoods and they tear down these bricks and build like townhouses and condos and all this expensive, gated, etc., it changes the whole landscape. So now you go from having an ugly neighborhood or something that just wasn't that high class, you tear that down and you build something high class, and the issue after displacement is the fact that these people know that they're basically washing away the cultural landscape of these neighborhoods. For instance, the Joe Johnson area in North Nashville. I don't know, recently in the Tennessean, actually, there was a debate about gentrification and how they wanted to start calling North Nashville City Heights as opposed to North Nashville. And North Nashville's like, you know, that's it.
Been North Nashville
Exactly.
since the very beginning of time.
It's North Nashville. But nevertheless, the Joe Johnson area, for example, if you go there today, go there now, you see these beautiful, multicolored, these tall houses, and they're nice, and you start to think that wasn't always there. I could have sworn that this was government-assisted housing only a few years ago. What's going on? Where are all the residents of when it was government-assisted? Because like now that it's upcharged, it's a whole new wave of people living here, and it's slowly starting to take away the itty-bitty cultural aspects of the city. For instance, Joe Johnson is a staple in North Nashville. In 20 years, your great-great-grandchildren will not know that Joe Johnson was a black staple in North Nashville simply because of the fact that it won't be black anymore.
And so in a real sense, Alana, I think that you can say that there's a large number of social problems that are associated with gentrification. And one, I think you've already hinted at one of the most important social problems, and that is the homeless population. That is, when people are removed from these houses or when they cannot afford to pay for either to buy or to rent these homes, then that creates a problem in terms of the population. Now, whether these individuals become homeless immediately or whether they become homeless over a time, or whether they still remain with an ability to obtain housing, the housing that they now have has been decreased in terms of what they at one time were able to afford or able to have. Is that what we're saying?
Exactly. Gentrification does definitely impact the homeless population in big cities that are being heavily gentrified. That would be San Francisco, New York City, Nashville, all these big cities where people want to live directly in the city, but there was already urban neighborhoods established around the city and people want to get rid of those urban neighborhoods. An example, or just going back to what I was saying about the homeless population, a big argument is how can realtors, can people who are being gentrified, can the people gentrifying, how can we decrease the cons of gentrification? Because there are some pros. They'd be new job opportunities from like the businesses that they'll build in the midst of gentrification, the new homes, all this new hangout opportunities, new restaurants, and that's cool and all, but it's not okay when you're taking a house that someone raised their kids in, and his mom was raised in that house and her mom was raised, all because you want to sell it to some Vanderbilt students who don't know any better. And, you know, honestly, gentrification, it's really one of those topics that you just have to honestly study, because there are some good sides I just named,
things in reference to gentrification,
but there are a lot of negatives, and depending on how you feel about the topic, I see more of the negatives than the positives, which is why I'm not a fan of gentrification. And so that's why I want to get awareness out so that people can make their own opinions and help either stop or push gentrification.
Okay, so we'll take our second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Ability to, what else do you want to, what other, we got 10 minutes now.
I was just going to talk about what gentrification does to like graduation rates, to black communities.
And okay, some of the factors of some of the impact of gentrification on the population. How would that be?
For instance, neighborhoods that are gentrified have lower graduation rates because once, you know, students are kicked out the neighborhood, they usually don't re-enroll in school. So black families that have experienced gentrification have lower literacy, graduation rates, college acceptance rates.
Some of the negative aspects of gentrification. Is that what, would that be a good way to open that? Now, we've got 10 minutes now. And anything you got to throw it in
Okay.
in this 10 minutes.
All right.
You think you can take
Yes.
it?
Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna open it back up. And ready? Thank you. Welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's giving us some information in reference to gentrification and, in a real sense, dealing with Nashville, Tennessee as an example. Alana, let's look at some of the other aspects of gentrification, and I think that you've already indicated some of the negative things in reference to it, but also let's look at the impact that it has upon individuals, upon young people, upon older people, and upon the other part of the population. I think we've already indicated that it has a tremendous problem in terms of increasing homelessness within a community, but go on and look at some of the other aspects of it.
Honestly, you could argue that gentrification is the root of a lot of major issues: crime, poverty, homelessness. And you could argue this in ways like you could say that gentrification, once a family is uprooted from their home, they can no longer afford it. And since so many other areas within the city are rapidly being gentrified, they can't afford that either, so they're pushed to the outskirts of the city. You could say that crime ties into gentrification because the breadwinners or the younger members of a family get out onto the street and want to make money so that they could keep the house that their grandmother raised their mother in, or that their great-grandmother raised their grandmother in. You could say that homelessness ties into it because people are displaced once their neighborhood is gentrified, because the majority of the time, the rate that rent is increased is so outrageous that the people can't afford it. And that's another thing that puzzles me about gentrification. How do you go into a government-assisted housing and charge 3 times what they were paying, knowing that what they were paying was 40% of their income, knowing that if you charge it, they're barely making it as is. You go and upcharge this 300, 500%, and then act bewildered when the whole community leaves, because people can't afford that. That's just economics. That's just how the world is. And I understand why gentrification happens. I understand that the projects and the urban neighborhoods around downtown Nashville, people want that. People want to be close to downtown Nashville because that's all the bars, the restaurants, the everything.
Most of the activity in reference
Exactly.
to the city.
And with Nashville being an it city, especially with like Amazon trying to bring their headquarters here, Nashville hosting the NFL draft, Nashville's really becoming an it city, hence why in 2000 only 5 areas in Nashville were gentrified, and now there are 12. It's been 18 years. Honestly, like, gentrification is growing at such a rapid rate, and there are so many problems associated with that I feel like should be tweaked before we continue with this. I understand why it's happening, and I understand that greed will overpower everything else. In the previous segment, I was saying that humanity ties into gentrification, because how could you honestly sit up and charge rent, like upcharge it 300%, knowing that 90% of the people living there who probably built their homes, worked hard to stay in their homes, work hard to provide for the families within their homes, how could you sit up and rob them blind, all because you want to move these people who give a blemish to the city? Because that's another thing. Gentrification is almost like a clean way of cleaning up the city, pushing out the drug dealers and the criminals and the underprivileged, the lower class, pushing them out, tearing down everything that they built, building something pretty and expensive and moving in pretty and expensive people, so that your city can look like it's making more money than it is, but in reality you're just pushing the poorer people to the outskirts of the city because they don't want to be seen. I mean, because who would want to go to the NFL draft and drive down Jefferson or Charlotte and see crime or drugs or drug addicts? Who wants to see that, right? That's what these people who gentrify these neighborhoods, that's what they have in their heads. They want to get rid of this cultural landscape. And the reason that it hits me so hard is because I march for a high school in North Nashville. So I'm constantly around Tennessee State University, Fisk University, all the Jefferson, 26, 20, all of North Nashville. I'm around it almost daily. And so seeing how this affects people and how it affects the people that I know and that I love, it's insane to me, all because of the fact that that's where they chose to reside.
Well, now, Alana, after all has been said and done, from your perspective, what do you think should be done in reference to relieve some of the issues that we're talking about? I mean, how can people meet some of the challenges of gentrification? Not only the individuals who are being gentrified, but the individuals who are also responsible for some of this gentrification. I mean, what would you consider to be some of the solutions, and what have some of your peers said in reference to how do you get out of such a trap?
Something that I've always thought would be a solution, or at least help gentrification, would be, as the rate of gentrification grows, we need to establish more Section 8 government housings within the city. If you look at a gentrification map of Nashville right now, you'll see that it's all shaded in around downtown Nashville: Charlotte, Inglewood, Shelby Park, Cleveland Street, Lichey. That entire area is all shaded, representing the fact that it's been gentrified. Now, when people who live in these areas usually work close to these areas, because I don't think that anyone's going to live in North Nashville and work in Madison. So let's have a scenario real quick. Say you're someone who lives in Joe Johnson pre-gentrification, and say you work at the Wendy's that's adjacent from Tennessee State University, which is relatively close to Joe Johnson, or the Sonic that's right there, or something that's close. Once you get gentrified, you can't keep that job. So after you lose your house, you're losing your source of income. I believe that if the rate of more government-assisted neighborhoods, if that went up, then gentrification wouldn't be as hard on families, because, like I said, the #1 issue with gentrification is displacement. People don't want to be homeless. That's a no-brainer. So why not have somewhere readily available for them to go once their area is gentrified? That would just honestly make sense. It could be on the outskirts, and a lot of government housing is on the outskirts now because they're pushing it outward so that they can bring the affluent residents inward. And so I honestly believe that we should just establish more neighborhoods like that and have a place available for people to go, not the homeless shelter, not the Mission, a home, because these people had a home before you decided to run them out of it. So why shouldn't they have a home in the end? That's my biggest argument for gentrification.
What about economic opportunities for individuals who have been gentrified? Are there many opportunities for people to find work or whatever in the downtown area or whatever?
Now, gentrification does bring in jobs, I will say that, but it also decreases social capital in the neighborhoods. And another example, say there's a neighborhood that's beside somewhere and you have a candy lady. A candy lady is someone who kids can go to like throughout the summer and thing and buy candy from. You gentrify that neighborhood, the candy lady's gone, that's her source of income. That's losing social capital for that neighborhood, for that urban area. And it's honestly, the only winners of gentrification are the big, like the investors and the people who are gentrifying, because they're making the money in the end. Almost everyone involved in gentrification loses. The families, the homes, the kids. It's actually been shown that gentrified families